And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. A great day to try to address some of the conflicts that have been dividing this country. One of the conflicts concerns our great universities. Are they basically liberal brainwashing pens, or are they great institutions of learning and the pride of America? There is a new report. It is not a politically partisan report. It has been endorsed by people on the right and, yes, some people on the left, though not as many. It's a report from Yale University about what needs to change in American higher education. We will get to that and see whether the Yale recommendations would make a bad situation even worse, or whether they offer a solution to some of the challenges with American education. And one of the challenges with American education has been, and it's drawn a lot of attention from the Trump administration, the appearance of anti-Semitism on major prestigious university campuses. How do you deal with that? A leader of the pro-Israel group, and it's undeniably pro-Israel. It's this group called Stand With Us. One of the leaders of that group and the local organizer here in the Seattle area is named Randy Kessler. He'll be joining us. And what do you do when you're holding a pro-Israel reception and you have hundreds of people attending, but then you're swamped by people who are supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and basically from the river to the sea, all Palestine will be free, that kind of sentiment, which is increasingly common in the Democratic Party. What's the right response to that? We will get to that. And we'll also be speaking to the distinguished columnist E.J. Dionne. He's a columnist both for the Washington Post, nationally syndicated, and for the New York Times. He has a piece about what the Democrats need to do if they're going to have a chance to not only win the off-year election, the midterm election, but to have a viable party that could win the presidency again in 2028. And what they need to do, says E.J. Dionne, is study up a little bit on their history of Ronald Reagan. How can Ronald Reagan school the Democrats? We will be getting to that. Meanwhile, Senate Republicans, in a very close, hard-fought battle, just approved a budget blueprint to fund ICE and Border Patrol. They did this without Democratic support, as Congress remains deadlocked over how to end the Department of Homeland Security shutdown. The measure passed 50 to 48. And given the fact that there are 53 Republicans in the United States Senate, you can see how close this was. Every Democrat was opposed to this solution, and 2 Republicans actually broke ranks to vote against it. So instead of getting the 53 votes that they would get if they had every Republican, they got nearly all of them. This comes as Democrats have firmly said they won't support any future funding for immigration enforcement unless there are major changes to ICE tactics and protocols. So the controversy continues, but the shutdown of the immigration operations, that basically is over. Speaking about over, a deadline for Iran to send a peace proposal to the U.S. remains unclear. The President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, said today there is no time frame for ending the war. which comes pretty close to saying there's no end to the war. Because how does the battle end? How does the fight end? What can the two parties, the Iran and the United States of America, possibly agree upon? Iran's president said the U.S. blockade on Iranian ports remains a major obstacle to talks. With U.S.-Iran diplomacy at an absolute standstill, attention is now turning to Israel and Lebanon, which are set to begin a second round of negotiations in Washington in the coming hours. Now, what's important to remember about this is two different countries that are very eager to have some kind of ceasefire or peace or truce, or better yet, even a settlement between the two of them. That's the nation of Lebanon and the nation of Israel. The difficulty here is Hezbollah, which is a terrorist organization funded by Iran and controlled by Iran. But within a few hours, coming sometime today, the representatives of Israel and Lebanon are preparing to get together to see what can be done to rein in the rocket attacks that have been perpetual on northern Israel, making a large part of northern Israel uninhabitable. And those rocket attacks have been from Hezbollah, not the Lebanese government. Is it all complicated? It's complicated. Is there some hope of some kind of settlement between Israel and Lebanon, which have been officially in a state of war since Israel's creation back 75 years ago? We will see what happens there. They are set to begin a second round of negotiations, Israel and Lebanon, in Washington, not in Pakistan, in the coming hours. President Trump's advisors appear to tacitly acknowledge that he has lost significant ground with voters over the past year. All the polls indicated. As a result, sources say they are developing a midterm election strategy that frames the election as a stark choice between the Republican and Democratic Party platforms rather than a direct referendum on Trump's personality or his presidency. This comes as 3 polls released this week place Trump's approval rating in the mid 30% range. And people remember that if you go back to Trump's first term as president, after he got elected president, defeating Hillary Clinton, he came in with a majority in the House of Representatives of the United States, and then in the midterm election, Trump lost 40 seats in the House of Representatives. Now, of course, all he has to do is lose 4 seats, not 40, and this time the Democrats take over the House. And one of the things the Democrats need to do is to take the talk away from impeachment, because impeachment is not a popular agenda item. And what about an agenda item that some people just don't want to touch? The item, COVID-19 vaccines, and the CDC taking a surprising position on that issue and more. Coming up on the Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, there is new information and breaking news about COVID-19 vaccines. Yes, COVID-19 still exists. We know personally people who have recently developed cases of COVID-19, dealing with it. Nothing life-threatening so far, at least for the people that we know. But meanwhile, the information from the CDC is that COVID-19 vaccines worked in reducing very sharply hospitalizations and emergency room visits among adults. That measured what was happening last fall and winter. That's good news, right? But you won't hear that good news from the federal agency behind the research. The federal agency is the Center for Disease Control. The acting director blocked publication of the positive findings in the agency's flagship journal, sources said, even though the study had cleared internal review and was scheduled for release. Now, this is extraordinary. Why is it extraordinary? Because generally, if there's a government agency and it turns out that they have a policy that has clearly worked, you'll hear all about it. They'll be very proud to let that information out there because it's rare enough that government programs actually work unequivocally. But one of the things about President Trump's first term is that there were a couple of things that were complete success stories, and they ought to be acknowledged. I mean, obviously, the Abraham Accords was a major achievement in foreign policy, but you also had the achievement of developing the COVID-19 vaccines, getting them out there, and saving people's lives. This was an achievement of Trump's administration the first time. So why are they trying to hide this internal review from the Centers for Disease Control that shows that the vaccines for COVID-19 have been proudly successful? The Dispatch writes that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will not publish the scientific findings of a report on the efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccines, which, according to the New York Times, showed that immunization reduced emergency room visits by 50% and hospitalizations by 55%. The findings were initially scheduled to be published on March 19th, but the Washington Post reported that acting CDC Director Jay Bhattacharya delayed their release after raising concerns about the report's methodology. However, the now blocked report was reportedly then approved after the CDC's standard scientific review process. A Health and Human Services Department official also told the New York Times that Bhattacharya, the acting head of the CDC, had met with the authors of the report about potentially using a different methodological design, which they declined. This is all still stirring. And in response to these developments, the committee chair in the Senate, Senator Bill Cassidy, who is a Republican, but he's also a physician, and he also takes that role seriously. That physician, Bill Cassidy, the senator from Louisiana, told Kennedy, this is R.F. Kennedy Jr., that he had cited the CDC and Johns Hopkins University incorrectly, and that the committee found that in the mid-1900s, once vaccines were more widely accessible, they contributed significantly to reducing disease-caused deaths. That's a simple context. Senator Kennedy told Secretary Kennedy, the Secretary of Health and Human Services. There's also the questions that were placed in a hearing in which RFK Jr. participated. Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts placed some questions to RFK involving some fuzzy math, and it's pretty fuzzy, where President Trump claimed a 600% reduction in drug prices. This is the way that Secretary Kennedy defended his boss on this issue. This is clip 6.
President Trump and the Republicans slashed health care for millions of families. The president pitched his Trump RX website as the answer for Americans who are worried about health care costs. He claims that Trump RX has reduced prices by as much as 600%. 600%, which I think means companies should be paying you to take their drugs.
Senator,
do you know what it
President Trump has a different way of calculating. If there's two ways of calculating percentage. If you have a $600 drug and you reduce it to 10, that's a 600% reduction.
Okay, and then Jimmy Kimmel had some fun with JFK Jr. And defunding Trump's math, and also took a few jabs at how Secretary Kennedy was awkwardly breathing heavily into the microphone during his congressional hearing. Listen.
You have to understand, President Trump has a different way of calculating from the rest of. Who are you going to believe, him or math? Have you ever bankrupted a casino? I don't think so. Now, the actual math is 98%, not 600%, but let's not get caught up in semantics. Let's just be quiet and listen to Robert Kennedy breathe.
Among the many that you described in your testimony. In that context, in your testimony, you identified nutrition as a bedrock of health. I don't think it was very long ago that there was probably very little nutrition taught in medical school. And now we are encouraging that to be a focal point.
You understand, our Secretary of Health is dying before our eyes, and no one is doing anything about it.
He was not actually falling asleep. It sounds like snoring, but it's difficulty breathing. Has his refusal to get vaccinated led to COVID-19? That's unclear. There is more about another cabinet member of unusual skills, Pete Hegseth. We will get to that.
Medved.
And in Washington, new news, unexpected news, actually, about yet another departure, another firing, another termination of a member of President Trump's cabinet, the Secretary of the Navy, who, by the way, had no experience in the U.S. Navy at all. But, okay, we will get to John Phelan, who was the Secretary of the Navy, but he is now gone. There, meanwhile, is further news about a maritime standoff, speaking of the U.S. Navy. This is from CNN. President Donald Trump has ordered the Navy to shoot and kill, and that's in quotes, any Iranian boats. It's interesting to try to kill a boat. I mean, you can sink it, but President Trump wants the boat shot at and killed. Shoot and kill any Iranian boats placing mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's top negotiators said Tehran had received its first revenue from tolls it has imposed on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Both sides see the vital waterway as pivotal to negotiations, and oil prices again rose amid the standoff. The timeline right now is uncertain. Trump said there is no deadline for ending the war with Iran, and the ceasefire also has no deadline or termination date to it at all. The response to his request for a peace proposal, we also don't know when that peace proposal is going to come forward. He expressed frustration, President Trump, saying Iran doesn't know who its leader is. Well, that's partially because so many leaders of Iran were killed. And that was the very first stages of Operation Epic Fury. The U.S. boarded a tanker today. The U.S. Defense Department said it boarded another sanctioned stateless vessel, which was carrying oil from Iran in the Indian Ocean. That happened overnight. And Israel and Lebanon talks. The U.S. will host a second round of talks between the Middle Eastern neighbors today amid a fragile ceasefire in Lebanon that has seen attacks by Israel and attacks from the Iran-backed Hezbollah terrorists. Meanwhile, a deadline for Iran to send a peace proposal to the U.S. remains unclear, with President Trump saying today there is no time frame for ending the war. Iran's president said the U.S. blockade on Iranian ports remains a major obstacle to talks. With U.S.-Iran diplomacy at a standstill, attention is now turning to Israel and Lebanon, which are set to begin another round of negotiations in Washington in the coming hours. President Trump's advisors appear to tacitly acknowledge that he has lost significant ground with voters over the past year. And as a result, the sources say they are developing a midterm strategy that frames the election as a stark choice between Republican and Democratic parties' platforms rather than a focus on President Trump's presidency or personality. And this comes together with three new polls that were released this week that placed Trump's approval in the mid to low 30s range, the worst it's been. And meanwhile, speaking of the worst it's been, the Defense Department, the Department of War, as Pete Hegseth would prefer to call it, announced yesterday that the Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan, will leave his post effective immediately, while news outlets reported that he was fired following a series of disagreements with senior Pentagon officials, including, who else? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. The Defense Department, or the War Department, as Pete Hegseth prefers it, did not state the reason for Secretary Phelan's departure. Under Secretary of the Navy Hung Kuo, that's Undersecretary of the Navy Hung Kuo, who is a former Virginia Republican candidate for the House in 2022 and the Senate in 2024, he will serve as acting Secretary of the Navy. Defense Department spokesman Sean Parnell announced Phelan's departure in a tweet, not much respect, noting that Hegseth and Deputy Defense Secretary Steve Feinberg were grateful for Phelan's service. Officials told the Wall Street Journal yesterday that Hegseth informed Phelan of his firing only minutes before Parnell tweeted the firing news, and the New York Times reported that both Hegseth and Feinberg had sparred with the Navy Secretary in recent months over issues including management style and personnel issues. The Mirror reports that Trump has urged the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, to resign herself. So she would be next in line, and not Kash Patel after that performance yesterday. Trump has urged the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, to resign before the midterm elections in November, according to reports. Trump's cabinet has been undergoing a serious purge this year. Now, when they used to do purges in the old Soviet Union, people would not just lose their jobs, they'd be killed. No one's going to be killed here, but they are going to be sent out into the private sector, which means you lose your government job. Some of the most notable figures have been ousted in shock exits, including Attorney General Pam Bondi, Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRaymer, And by the way, the most recent material on her involves her helping her father and her husband in basically going after young women who were working for Lori Chavez de Reymer, the labor secretary. And also, of course, there's Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who was not fired because she killed her dog once upon a time. She was fired because she made a mess of the ICE attempts to do mass deportations. This was not a positive. And there is more about what is going on politically, because one of the big issues that is going on politically right now has to do with the debates in California. Why is that such a big issue right now? Because right now there is a very different race for governor of the Golden State, the largest state in the union in terms of population, and by far. There are 6 remaining candidates for governor of California. And the top 6, and there actually are like 60 candidates, but the top 6 in terms of the polls appeared together yesterday, last night, as the primary rapidly approaches and no candidate has emerged as a clear front runner. So what happened in that California debate, and how does it reflect the absence of Eric Swalwell? You remember him. We will get to that and highlights and lowlights more coming up on the Medved Show. And there is still a certain amount of stunning perplexity, or stunned perplexity, actually, on the part of the Washington establishment with the departure, the dismissal of the Secretary of the Navy, the Honorable John Phelan. And they write in the Associated Press that Phelan's departure is the latest in a series of shakeups of top leadership at the Pentagon, coming just weeks after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth fired the Army's top uniformed officer, General Randy George. And showing how sudden the latest move was, John Phelan, the Secretary of the Navy, had addressed a large crowd of sailors and industry professionals on Tuesday this week at the Navy's annual conference in Washington, and he spoke with reporters about his agenda. He also hosted the leaders of the House Armed Services Committee to discuss the Navy's budget request and efforts to build more ships. Good. That according to a social media post from his office. But Phelan, Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell, said in a post on X that Phelan was departing the administration effective immediately. That's the day after his big speech to a crowd of sailors and people doing business with the Navy. Phelan had never served in the military, and that's, by the way, not true of his acting replacement, who has a distinguished naval background. We'll get to that. But Phelan had not served in the military or had a civilian leadership role in the service before Trump nominated him for Secretary of the Navy in late 2024. So how'd the guy get this job? The guy got the job because Phelan was a major donor to Trump's campaign and had founded the private investment firm Rugger Management, LLC. According to his biography, Phelan's primary exposure to the military came from an advisory position he once held on the Spirit of America. That was a nonprofit that supported the defense of Ukraine, good, and the defense of Taiwan. and the Associated Press could not immediately reach Phelan or his office for a comment on his dismissal. Now, the replacement, who is Hank Howe, is a very, very different story. Hank Howe fled Vietnam with his family when he was 4 years old. He lived in Niger as a child while his father worked for USAID. USAID, of course, defunded as part of the effort to pare back government expenses. Cal enlisted in the Navy in 1989 before graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy and earning a commission as a special operations officer. He served on active duty as a diver and explosive ordnance technician with deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, notably leading the team that recovered the body of John F. Kennedy Jr. off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. Cal was action section head for the Budget Programming Division in the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations before retiring as a captain in 2021. He has a master's degree in applied physics from the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, and completed fellowships at MIT and Harvard. The acting Navy Secretary, Hung Howe, who steps into the role after the sudden departure of John Phelan, is a veteran naval officer and former refugee who earned a position with the Trump administration with campaigns for political office in Virginia marked by religious intolerance. When Cal was first appointed, the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, set him to modernizing base infrastructure and quality of life issues for sailors and Marines and to raise recruiting standards. Cal has also been a point person in the administration on permitting vaccine refusal and eliminating DEI policies in the military. In other words, he is somebody who has been loyal to President Trump and President Trump's agenda. He has been sharply outspoken about the military's recruiting practices, saying in a debate with Tim Kaine, the senator from Virginia, when he ran against him for Senate in 2024, that the military should be recruiting, quote, alpha males and alpha females who are going to rip out their own guts, eat them, and ask for seconds. It sounds fairly colorful. At his confirmation hearing, Hung Howe described an aircraft carrier as 99,000 tons of American diplomacy, but noted that the availability of ships hovered around 60%, which he described as horrid readiness. Asked about his views on how to either use the existing fleet or to transition to a new paradigm for naval warfare, Hung Howe said that the military was living each day like it was the 10th of September 2001, the day before the terrorist attack, and that the country must accelerate shipbuilding while improving technology so that it can defeat hypersonic missiles and other threats. All in all, it sounds like a much more conspicuously qualified appointment for the position of acting Secretary of the Navy. And I'm not sure that there should be much delay or difficulty for Hung Howe in his confirmation process. And very, very confident that he will go through that process effectively. Apparently, he's also a very emotionally exciting and gifted speaker, which should do well with any hearings that he must undergo. Speaking of hearings and debates, the top 6 remaining candidates who are running for governor of California, faced off Wednesday as the primary rapidly approaches, and no candidate has emerged as a clear front runner. Now, as you have heard on the show, because we have been talking about it for a while, this is one of those sleeper races that most people have ignored because it's California and it's overwhelmingly Democratic. But the problem that the Democrats had was not just with Eric Swalwell, who has now resigned from Congress and pulled out of the race for governor of California. The problem the Democrats had was there were too many of them, a total of 8 who were competing for 2 places in the final election. And they have what is called a jungle primary in California, where you can vote for anybody, for any party, and the top 2, whether it's one Democrat and one Republican, whether it's 2 Democrats, or whether it's 2 Republicans, the top 2 get into the final race. And given the fact that they now are down to 6 Democrats who are near the top of the polls and 2 Republicans, the 2 Republicans at the moment are running ahead, number 1 and number 2. So if the election were held today, there would be no Democratic candidate for governor of California. And that's why the main thing the Democrats are looking for is some clarity in terms of a front runner that they can get behind and make sure somebody clears the primaries so you don't have an all Republican general election. Meanwhile, we're going to be joined by a leader in the Jewish community who just had the experience of having an event, a pro-Israel event, disrupted, challenged. Why is the Democratic Party turning so strongly against Israel? That and more coming up for consideration in this greatest nation on God's green earth.